What's up, folks? Captain Blade J52 here today. And this go around, I'm out and about in Star Trek Online flying my Galord tank, which actually brings me to today's topic: building a ship that can take the hits but also deal them right back to the enemy, or in other words, building a tank. Now, with the release of Season 11.5 just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, wow, it's really been almost a month, but since Season 11.5, I've seen a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions about different things floating around from people, such as, is this type of build still viable? Can I still use this type of weapon here? Can I still build that type of ship, or fly that type of ship, or use that type of weapon? In other words, just kind of a lot of uncertainty across the board. So, I figured I would take today and kind of, show what I'm using as a tank, and go over some different things, hopefully give some people some ideas for their own stuff maybe, or just give them the answer to the question they were looking for. But anyways, I suppose we should go ahead and get started. Now, I myself prefer to tank whenever I'm playing a game, just because that's what I like to do, that's what I enjoy doing. Be it here in Star Trek Online, be it in Star Wars The Old Republic, or even World of Warcraft whenever that was my jam, and that was my main thing that I did. Now, here in Star Trek Online, the lines are kind of blurred between the traditional, what they call the Holy Trinity of MMOs, which is the tanks, the healers, and the DPS. Pretty much any type of ship, any type of character can tank, any type can deal damage, and any type can be a healer. It just kind of depends on how you set your stuff up, what kind of ship you use, all that sort of thing. Now, as far as tanking goes, where should you begin? And for me, I'm actually going to say the skills. That's going to be your foundation for how you build your character. That's going to be your foundation and be a lot of your core abilities. So let's go ahead. We're going to look at the skill tree for a minute here. Down below in the video description and whatnot, you're going to have a link to the skill tree video that I did earlier in case you're kind of confused on that. So I'm not going to spend too much time going over that. Now, one thing I will say as far as your skills go, you want to make sure that you have the right balance of skills that cater to you being a tank. You don't want to be so heavy that in the tanking area or in the defensive area that you can't deal enough damage in order to keep the enemy's attention. You don't want to be able to take 200 billion point hits, but at the same time you're barely even scratching his paint. You're not going to be able to keep his attention that way. And the chief role of a tank in a game is to actually keep the enemy's attention focused on him or her to soak up as much damage as possible, and that's kind of what you want to do. You want to make sure that you're keeping the enemy's attention. That way, the rest of your group members can do what they need to do to kill the boss. Now, the big important thing about your skills is they are the foundation for your character. They, in most games, are where a lot of your core abilities are going to come from. Now, in my case, this is the setup that I use. You can see the lieutenant skills that I have there, the lieutenant commander. I've got 1 point in hull restoration, 2 points in hull capacity, 1 in shield restoration, 2 in shield capacity, and 2 in energy weapon training. For Lieutenant Commander, I have 2 in EPS flow regulation, 1 in impulse expertise. Then I've picked up all 3 points of control expertise. I've picked up 2 points in drain expertise. I have 1 in targeting expertise, 2 in defensive maneuvers. Then I have all 3 points of the hull plating picked up. I have 2 in shield hardness, 2 in weapon amplification, 3 points in advanced weapon specialization. Then in the captain, I have 1 point in defensive subsystems. I have an offensive subsystem, and also a point in engine subsystem performance. Then I have 2 in exotic particle gens, 2 in long-range targeting sensors. Then I have 3 points in hull penetration and 3 in shield weakening. Then I have 1 point in warp core potential, all 3 points of shield mastery, and that is my spec. Now, as far as your skills go, one of the big things I will say right away, you do not, and I repeat, do not have to pick up the ultimate abilities for the individual schools. You don't have to pick up the EPS corruption just because you're an engineer. You don't have to pick up the science ultimate of probability manipulation just because you're a science officer. And you don't have to pick up focused frenzy just because you're a tactical officer. Now, me personally, I believe that the ultimate abilities are red herrings. I don't think they're as good as people like to say that they are. Are they fun stuff that you can use? Absolutely. Can they have their uses, and do they have their uses? Absolutely they do. And this also isn't to knock the developers of Star Trek Online either. I believe they've made some really interesting abilities. It's just, as far as, for me, for what I like to do, I don't think they're that great. I think they could have been a lot better. But again, that's just my personal opinion. Feel free to agree with me, disagree with me on that, whatever your thing. Now, as far as your chosen abilities, I liked to pick up battery expertise, then I picked up transwarp cooldown just because, sector speed or transwarp, not really, much there. Then the big thing I'm actually going to recommend that you pick up for tanking is actually the threat control unlock that you can get, because that's an additional 100% threat generation while in threatening stance, and also a minus 100% threat gen while not in threatening stance. So it's an additional bit of threat that you're getting for free just by turning on threatening stance. Then between maximum hull or subsystem, I picked the hull. That's kind of really personal preference, honestly. Then maximum shield cap or starship stealth, I picked the stealth just because I do occasionally use a intelligence ship as well, and I have a few ships Federation side that can actually cloak, so that's, I don't know, it's just something I picked up because I thought I had enough shield capacity as is. Then projectile, critical chance, critical damage, pretty much pick whatever you want, what works best for you. Starship perception or control resist, I actually went with control resist. Then energy critical chance or energy critical damage, I picked the critical chance just because there really is no right or wrong way to do it as far as these unlocks down here goes. And as far as your skills go, pretty much any setup will function. How effective it's going to be is another thing entirely. Now, the reason I use this setup is because it gives me a good balance of offensive and defensive potential. The big thing you want to look for as a tank is you want to make sure that you're not so over-specialized in the defensive side of things that you can never deal enough damage to kill something, or it takes you 20 years to beat one guy. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you don't want to be so over-specialized in damage dealing that you gimp yourself in your defensive ability to within 1 or 2 hits and you're dead. You want to kind of strike a balance between the two. So that's where I'm going to advise everybody to start, is their skills as far as their tanking goes. Now, once you get to a high enough level, you're going to unlock the specializations. Currently in game at the moment, we have the Command Officer, the Intelligence Officer, Pilot, Commando, and Strategist. Now, Cryptic has been adding more specializations, secondary and primary, over time. We're actually going to be seeing another one here pretty soon. It's the Temporal Officer, which is actually coming this summer. It's not yet out at the time that I filmed this, but we'll see how Temporal Officer goes whenever they start releasing more stats on that. But for me personally, at the moment, the ones that I like to run are Pilot and, of course, Strategist. You can see Pilot there, I've got that maxed out. And as far as Pilot goes, I'll go ahead and read the bonus. It's while the Pilot specialization is active, you will gain a 10% increase to your starship turn rate. The bonus increases by a small amount for each point spent in the specialization. And then the current bonus I have is a 40% turn rate for free just by having this active. Now, aside from the turn rate, which is a big bonus to Pilot that you have, another thing, or another reason why I like to have it is because of the defensive utilities and potential that it gives me as well. such as the rock and roll ability. Whenever you use this, you're immune to all incoming damage, you gain some flight speed, and your turn rate, of course, is set to 0, and you're immune to slows. So you use this, then you should get a little bit of... you should be able to take the pressure off yourself for a couple of seconds, maybe buy yourself a little bit of time for a heal to come back up, or what have you. So you've got that stuff there. Then another reason I like to have it is the Turn the Other Cheek ability. When you have it maxed out at Turn the Other Cheek 3, on damage it reduces damage to shields by 20% to the opposite shield facing. So, and all 4 of your shield facings can actually be enhanced at the same time. That's why some of my fleet mates that fly with me and everything, they may see me actually fly in a little bit of a circle. That way I make sure that the enemies hit all of my shield facings, therefore I have this damage buff, or damage reducing buff up at all times. So that's one reason I like it. Now it may seem kind of dumb to some people, just looking over that and glancing, it's like, well, if you're getting hit on the left side of the ship, why is it buffing the right side? Or if you're getting hit on the right, why is it buffing the left? Well, again, like I said a moment ago, all 4 shield facings can have that buff at the same time. So if you play your cards right, you can essentially have a 20% reduction across the board on all facings. Now, the other reason I like to use Pilot as my primary is because of this ability, which is called Thick of It. In this case, this is the maxed out version, which, whenever Turn the Other Cheek becomes active on all 4 of your shield facings at the same time, you are granted a brief period of complete damage immunity. Now this can only happen once every 30 seconds and it lasts for 4 seconds. That may not seem like a lot, but when you actually sit down, when you're actually in the thick of it, no pun intended, and you're fighting a ton of guys, it's possible for quite a bit of damage to be coming in at once. This is actually really good because if you're taking a lot of hits, that gives you a couple of seconds to plan out your heals, maybe buy some time for something to come up, and even then that just lets you extend your abilities out a lot more. That's a couple of seconds that you're not taking damage, which lets you focus on, okay, where's this guy at, and focus on your situational awareness of what's going on the battlefield. So there's quite a bit of stuff there. Then you can get other fun little abilities, nifty things, such as Danger Zone. You gain a bonus to your damage output for each foe within 2 kilometers of your ship. This can stack up to 10 times max, and then of course it does not apply to mines, turrets, or targetable torps. And then Danger Zone is plus 2% bonus all damage per foe within 2 kilometers. So, fun little thing that you have there. There's some nice little toys in here. Then for me, the last thing is the Lone Wolf ability. This one has actually saved my rear end quite a few times, actually. Which is, take on the role of the Lone Wolf, single-handedly defeating the gathered foes and conquering the odds. Any players on your team that are within 10 kilometers will automatically placate foes near them when you activate this, making you the only valid target in range for a short time. To survive the inevitable onslaught of incoming fire, the Lone Wolf gains increased defense and automatic shield redistribution for the duration of this ability. This placate effect granted to allies is fragile to their own damage. If they continue dealing damage, it will wear off quickly. So that's the description for that. Now, the big key thing with this, while this is active, you gain 50% defense for 10 seconds, you distribute shield strength to shields receiving damage for 10 seconds, so it's essentially a duplicate tactical team effect, which we're going to be looking at bridge officer abilities here in a minute. Then you placate, the team placates all enemies within 10 kilometers of themselves, such as, let's say you're taking a lot of damage. You need just an extra burst of defensive ability to get yourself through that. Then this is one thing that you're going to want to have, in my personal opinion, because that is a huge, huge bonus. Then, like I say, it also gives you a second tactical team effect. Again, we're going to look at that in just a moment. But that's one reason why I like this tree, is because of neat little defensive abilities, things like that you have. Then the other one that I'm using currently, I'm still working on filling this tree out a little bit, is the Strategist tree. Now, I tested this for quite a while on Tribble before it was actually released as one of the bug hunters, and I liked what I saw. I was dealing a lot more damage and also surviving a lot longer because of this. Now, currently, it says, while the Strategist, I can't talk today apparently, is active, you will gain a 5% increase to your maximum shield capacity. This bonus increases by a small amount for each point spent in the shield specialization. So currently, just by having this active, I'm getting 7.3% maximum shield capacity for free. Now, the cool things about Strategist is you actually get a few fun little abilities to work with. Now, one of them is logistical support. You gain temporary hull when healed by bridge officer and captain abilities while threatening. So, while you're in threatening stance, you get some extra healing and some extra temporary hull. Then, while you're not in threatening stance, you gain critical chance buff when healed by bridge officer and captain abilities. So, this particular secondary is set up so that it has benefits to both dealing damage and also taking damage. So, for somebody like me, this is pretty much a must-have at the moment as far as tanking. I'm going to recommend actually that you use Pilot as your primary, and then Strategist as, of course, your secondary, since that's all Strategist will let you be, is a secondary for it. Then you've got some other stuff, such as once you start filling out the tree, you've got Logistical Support 3, which is, while threatening, you gain 30% of incoming bridge officer or captain hull healing as temporary hull for 10 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. So pretty much as long as you're healing, as long as that's going on, this is going to remain active. You're going to have more temporary hull maximum than you otherwise normally would. Now, on Tribble, whenever I had this filled out, whenever I was doing my testing and everything, my standard hull actually doubled from where it is. You can see here, currently sitting in sector space, I'm at, or not sector space, but in Sol system, I'm sitting at 76,468 hull, which is actually pretty good for this galore. I'm also not moving at the moment, so my defense is going to be a little bit lower. Let's actually go ahead and take it to 1/4. You can see some of the bonus defense I've got there. So you can see that there, going from 75k all the way close to almost 150k hull. That's a pretty good sized jump. So hopefully folks can see why I've got that. But then also I've got some other abilities. You can see here on my stats I've got decent resist across the board. Those are actually going to go up a lot higher once I'm able to activate my personal buffs and I actually get into combat. Kind of see some of the stats I'm working with there. Decent crit chance, decent severity and everything. But again, I rely more on other things to allow me to generate threat. Now, this actually brings us to the next thing, since we're looking at the ship itself. Once you've got your specializations, you've got your skills, then you're going to want to pick out the best ship. Excuse me. Allergies are a pain this time of year for me. But anyway, aside from my allergies and everything, getting back into this now. The next big thing after you have your specialization, after you have your skills, after you have that stuff set up, you're going to want to pick the ship that is best for you. Now, there is no set in stone. This is the ship you have to tank with, and that's it. If you don't tank with this type of ship, then you're an idiot. There is nothing like that in this game. Given the proper setup and the proper pilot, pretty much any ship can be a tank. It's just a matter of how effective are they going to be. Now, there is no set in stone best ship in game. There are, however, certain ships that lend certain advantages to certain types of builds and playstyles that other ships just simply can't do. If you're wanting to dart around, you're wanting to move really quick, you're wanting to deal, a lot of quick damage, darting in and out, back and forth, pretty much trying not to break the light barrier in the process, then A big giant cruiser is probably not what you're going to want to fly, just because they can't turn as quick and they're a lot slower. So if you like darting in and out and back and forth and stuff like that, like you're flying a little mini jet plane or something, then you probably want to consider something such as one of the pilot ships or one of the other escorts that are in game. I just use the pilot ships as those are a prime example of some type of ships like that. Now, if you don't really care as much about that kind of stuff, then you might want to go the cruiser, which is kind of what I did. The Galore, technically, I would say is more of a battle cruiser. It has some of the speed and maneuverability of an escort, but it also has the defensive and offensive power of a cruiser as well. So it's kind of one of those oddball ships that are in the middle of the spectrum. So you've got stuff like that. But the big thing with your ship you're going to want to have, you want to have a decent balance of defensive ability, defensive potential, and offensive potential. Now, if you wanted to, you could tank in a little pilot escort. If that's what you wanted to do, there's some decent pilot abilities out there that would actually assist with that. But I personally don't think it's going to be as effective as something such as a cruiser will be, just because cruisers typically have a lot more hull to work with, and because they have a lot more usually defensive potential to work with by having more engineering and science-based abilities. Now, that's not to knock ships like that if that's what you prefer to tank in. It's just I personally believe you're going to have a lot better time with something like a cruiser. Again, just my personal take on that. But anyways, before I get sidetracked in a little mini rant, let's go ahead and take a look at this here. Now, I myself picked the Galore because I think it has the right balance of speed and maneuverability for what I'm wanting to do. It has, for me, the perfect bridge officer setup for what I'm wanting to do. And for me, it's been my go-to ship and my partnership for several years now, since I started playing the game almost. Way back in like the tip end of 2012, early 2013. So, needless to say, I've had the ship quite a while. It does me pretty good. I'm able to, currently at the time that I filmed this, I'm able to deal over 50,000 points of damage, or DPS per second, back to the enemy, while also tanking over 100,000 DPS coming at me as well. So the ship can take a beating and also give one right back. Not saying that to be arrogant or anything, that's just the numbers that I'm seeing. But as you can see here down below with the bridge officer setup, I have a commander engineering, a lieutenant engineering, lieutenant commander tactical, ensign science, and lieutenant universal. Pretty much every ship out there, except for a few certain ones today, will have some type of universal seating. Now, if I wanted to, I could have made this lieutenant science that I've got here into another engineering, another tactical, or just leave it as it is. Just depends on the need. But anyways, the reason I liked this was because it gives me a good balance of defensive and offensive potential. Now, getting into some of these abilities and why I have them. As far as offensive potential goes and everything, for my tactical abilities, I have, if it will actually pop the tooltip up, there it goes. I have the Tactical Team 1, which it distributes shield strength to shields receiving damage for 10 seconds, and it reduces the tactical team recharge by 8 seconds. Apparently I've got some... Okay, I've got an ability that's reading into the text there that confuses me from time to time, but I'll explain that stuff in a minute. Needless to say, the thing about Tactical Team is it gives you a little bit of a temporary boost to your energy weapon training and to your projectile weapon training, letting you deal a little bit more damage. It also removes hostile boarding parties from your ship for 10 seconds and purges that, and removes any and all tactical debuffs for 10 seconds. And so that's a good thing that you have there. Now, the reason I was mentioning this with the pilot ability Lone Wolf earlier is because this is that ability Lone Wolf is essentially a second version of this in one of its effects. So for 20 seconds, if you have to use Lone Wolf and Tactical Team back to back with each other, you could essentially extend it out to where your shields will automatically distribute themselves for 20 seconds. And in the middle of a firefight, that's a pretty good chunk there. That's a pretty good amount of time that you're going to want to have that. So that's a couple of the things that you have there. Then, of course, I have my fire at will. This pretty much lets me smack anything in range up to, where's that out on the tooltip there? Anyway, I don't actually see it, but pretty much as long as it's within weapons range, it has the chance of being smacked with a beam attack. So that pretty much lets me, it gives me an AoE ability, pretty much is why I use it. And it's also good for increasing damage. Now, a lot of people may say to use attack pattern beta instead of attack pattern omega, but there's a reason that I do this, or to consider using attack pattern delta. Now, the reason I picked attack pattern omega versus one of the others is a little bit, yes, for the damage increase, but also for the other benefits that it gives you. Attack pattern omega is actually one of those attack patterns that can be used offensively or defensively depending on how you do it. Now, for self, it gives me 15% all damage for 15 seconds, 22.5 all damage resist for 15 seconds, 127.6% flight speed strength for 5 seconds, and flight turn rate for 15 seconds, immunity to movement debuffs and disable debuffs for 15 seconds, 27% defensive, if I could talk today, strength for 5 seconds, and immunity to teleport for 15 seconds. So that's some good stuff that I have there, just as some examples of everything. So essentially, as far as tanking, how does this benefit you aside from the damage? Well, the damage is obviously going to let you deal more threat, which is a big thing that you're going to want to do for tanking. You're going to want to make sure, if you have it, that the attract fire ability is active, and also that the threatening stance ability is active. When you activate threatening stance and also the attract fire ability, that's 400% additional threat that you're cranking out that typically that I've seen in today's game that the other team just isn't going to do. They're not going to have, usually, unless of course you get somebody else in there trying to tank or something like that, or they're just dealing so much more damage than you that you could never hope to keep up. Unless something like one of those two extremes happens, for the most part, that's going to be enough to do what you need to do as a tank. That's going to be enough to assure that you are cranking the numbers that you need, cranking the damage, to get done what you need to get done. So you've got that stuff there. Then another reason why I like Strategist is actually the diversionary tactics. This, pretty much it taunts the enemies and makes them attack you. Then, while threatening, it taunts all enemies within 10 kilometers and forces them to attack you for a certain amount of time, and you generate 50% more threat for those few seconds. Then, while threatening, you gain 2.5% of your max hull per affected foe over 10 seconds for a maximum of 5 foes. So, it's actually a little bit of healing there, in addition to that. So, it's essentially a little something that you could smack them in the face with as well. It's like, oh, hey, come attack me. So, and I've used this in runs with some of my friends as well. I'll go in there, maybe their hull's low, I'll do a quick flyby, I'll hit this ability, now they're attacking me. Instead of my friend, they can go back and heal, buff up, and then come back and then smack the snot out of them. So, that's a good thing that we have there. Now, as far as what's some of the other stuff that we have once we've picked our ship, where should we go from there? Once you pick the ship, then you want to have your bridge officer abilities, like I was saying. You've got that. As far as the setup that I use Tactical Team 1, Fire at Will 2, then Omega 1. Then for my Commander Engineering, I use Engineering Team 1. Pretty much self-explanatory. Get a good chunk of my health back, and removes engineering debuffs for 5 seconds. And of course it reads dodge 20% of all incoming damage for 3 seconds. So nice little buff there. Then I've got directed energy modulation 1 just because I needed something to fill the slot. Then I have emergency power to weapons 3. This lets me keep my weapons going, which also gives me the added benefit of ensuring that I'm able to keep that threat going consistently, in addition to the offensive ability it gives me. Then I have the Emit Unstable Warp Bubble 3. This actually comes from one of the missions. I can't remember what it is exactly off the top of my head. I think it's Delta Flight is the name of the mission. And I can't remember it exactly off the top of my head. I'll probably include it in the video description or something. But what this does to all enemies within 4 kilometers of you, they lose 42.9% all damage and 66.6% flight speed for 20 seconds. It disables their ability to launch fighters, hazard emitters, fields, and platforms for 36, may as well say 37 seconds. Prevents ship separation if they have that type of ability. So it's a nice little kick in the pants. It's a nice damage reducer. If you find yourself taking a lot of damage from a lot of enemies, you can throw this and cut quite a bit of the damage out. Now, that may not seem like a lot to some people, excuse me, but when you think about it, just the potential that you have, if you take, say you're fighting 10 enemies, and that ability gets used, then you've essentially removed almost 420% of the damage out of the equation there, if you, of course, do the math. Now, like I say, I'm not a math whiz, but needless to say, you're going to cut the damage down quite a bit for that 20 seconds, unless they purchase the debuff. So huge, huge thing to have. Definitely recommend that you have it if you're going to tank. Then I have a duplicative engineering team, just so I can have, an extra heal when the first one's on cooldown. This one will hopefully be ready to go, or pretty close to ready to go. Lets me use it more often. Then I have reverse shield polarity, converts energy damage into shields. So while this is active, I can pretty much use it to recharge my shields, just depending on how I point the ship at the enemy. Hazard emitters, it gives me some hull healing over time, so it's essentially a hot ability, and gives me a little bit of damage resist for 15 seconds, and it also keeps purging hazard debuffs while it's active. So pretty much kind of self-explanatory. Purges some debuffs, gives me some healing over time. Nice little thing to have there. Science team gives me some shield regeneration to each facing, removes science debuffs for 5 seconds. Again, kind of self-explanatory. Now, the other thing too, with feedback pulse, this allows me to deal some of the damage back to the enemy. For however much damage they hit me with, they hit themselves in the form of a feedback pulse back for however much of a percentage the math would work out to be. So that's just, at least for this ship anyway, that's some of the abilities that I like to have. Now, you can be successful with other abilities besides just what I have here. This is just my personally preferred setup. But anyway, once we've picked the ship, we've got our bridge officer abilities, we've got our skills and our specialization set. The next thing we're going to look at, of course, is our equipment. What in blazes are we going to put on this thing? Now, I myself, I like to use the Kobali set, specifically the 4-piece set bonus for me, because I personally believe it's the best tanking set in the game. Some people may disagree with me on that, and hey, that's cool. We all like what we like, and we're good with what we're good with. But some of the reasons I recommend this set is because of just exactly what it gives you. So I'll go ahead and pull this up. Now, a bit of a caveat before I scroll down and actually read this to everybody so you can see kind of what you're getting. If you missed the anniversary event, currently at the time of filming this, there is no way for you to obtain the Kobali Samsar. So unless you were actually there to get it, then you're not going to be able to use the Kobali set to its fullest potential. You could still use the set, absolutely, but it's not going to be as effective than if you had the 4-piece set bonus. So one little thing I do want to mention with that as a little bit of a caveat: if you can't use the Kobali set as far as your shields, your engines, your warp core, stuff like that goes, then I would recommend another good set that has a good built-in heal is actually the Soul Defense set. It's a pretty good one. The Iconian set is pretty decent at tanking. Then the Dyson set is great for tanking. So you've got a few options out there if you don't decide to use the Kobali set. But anyway, what makes the Kobali set so good is actually the set bonuses that it grants you. You have on the Warp Core the Kobali Shield Capacitor. It's pretty much a get your shields back to full button, at least in my case. It's going to restore quite a bit of your shields and also restore it to anybody that's nearby. So, pretty big thing there. It's got kind of a long recharge at 4 minutes, but it's well worth it to have a nice little emergency shield regen when you need it. Then for the 2-piece set bonus, you have the 0.2 hull regeneration, which that's going to go up as, of course, you lose health. And you have the Kobali Nanite screen. When receiving damage while at 25% or less hull hit points, you have a 100% chance to apply the Kobali Nanite screen, which grants you 15,000 temporary hit points for 15 seconds, and that can only occur once every 120 seconds. So, pretty much what that's going to do is allow you a nice little emergency thing and give you some emergency health to work with, so to speak. Then the last thing you have, which in my opinion makes this one of the most useful sets, if not the strongest tanking sets in the game, is actually the reactive nanite screen. Now this affects friends and of course you up to 20 people max within a 5-kilometer sphere. It's on a 2-minute recharge. When receiving energy damage, nearby allies receive hull healing equal to 20% of the incoming damage for 15 seconds. Now this also does affect you. I just want to make that clear for anybody that may be confused by the wording. It does affect you as the player. So that's one reason why you're going to want that. Then the last thing you have is the Regenerative Integrity Field. I like to have this because it increases the hull healing that I do, and it also gives me a nice emergency heal whenever I need it in the form of a console. It is a universal console. It comes from the Kobali Samsar yet again. So if you have access to the Samsar, definitely consider using this on your tank. It's a nice emergency heal, and even if you're not a tank and you want to have a nice little oh crap I'm about to die button, then this is the console for you. It's something you're going to want to consider. Then as far as my consoles go, pretty standard layout here. It's the low-buy console, the binaural infusion circuits, plasmonic leech to help me get a little bit of extra power, tachyokinetic converter for the chance and severity that it gives. Also the flight turn speed is yay pretty good. Then I also have some exotic particle focusers with Drain X and exotic particle gens, which of course boost shield draining abilities, stuff like that, and of course my feedback pulse damage. I also get the effect of the exotic particle synergy, which you can read in the tooltip there. Then tactical consoles pretty much at the moment are pretty standard. I've got one that boosts the Tetrion damage. Then I'm using my beams consoles because I don't yet have all 100% Tetrion just yet. I'm still working on that part. But you want to, pretty much, this is the thing with tactical consoles, you want to tailor them to the energy type that you're using. Eventually, all of these will be Tetrion-specific consoles. But in the meantime, as a holdover until you actually get the Tetrions, in my case, or whatever energy type you're specializing to, then you could use plus beam consoles. But just be aware if you do that, you are going to leave just a little bit of damage on the table. Now, that may not seem like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but it's something that you're going to want to be aware of. Then, as far as the other consoles I have, since I'm running Tetrion, I use the Sticky Web console because it boosts Tetrion damage, and it lets me poof up a wall that enemies can't get past. So, it's sort of, in my case, a pseudo-gravity well type of thing, which can be used to stop enemies from advancing. So, nice little something there that I have. Then I'm using the Temporal Disentanglement Suite console, which gives me some maximum shield capacity. a little bit of crit severity, crit chance for however much I've got in aux power, and a little bit of a damage reduction to the shields. Then I have that along with this Tetrion Omni, which is the one from the mission, so I could get the set bonus. Go ahead and show what that does. Which basically it gives me a little bit of extra Tetrion damage, is what it does. So I personally have Tetrions so that I can take advantage of the shield draining abilities, the shield stripping, and it's just the energy type I chose. As far as energy types go, your weapons, contrary to popular belief, I don't care what anybody says, there is no set in stone best energy type. There's no use this or you're a moron. That stuff just doesn't work. You can do great damage with any energy type in the game. The only time energy type matters is when you're trying to make specialized builds. You know, if you're making, for example, a draining build, could you use anti-protons if you wanted to? Absolutely you could. But if your goal is to drain the enemy's power, then what you're going to want to consider is actually going with Polaron. That's what I would recommend in that case, because the Polaron proc is specifically power drain, and that can be boosted to be a lot more effective. So you've got that there. Now, once you've got your equipment, all that stuff set up, the last couple of things you're going to want to look at are your traits and perhaps any other abilities that you can pick up there, as well as your duty officers. Now, as far as traits go, for your personal space traits, if you're an alien character, you're going to have one additional trait to pick from that's not just automatically, oh hey, you've got to take this. So it's one little advantage you have as an alien character. You don't have to play as an alien, but that's just something to be aware of. I like to use Ablative Shell because it gives me a little bit of my heal, or my hull back, gives me a little bit of damage resist. You can see that there. So nice little thing to have there. Then if you start maxing out some of your crafting, you can pick up other stuff such as this, which is Beam Barrage. Gives me a little bit of extra damage, which I can then translate into threat. I've got the Elusive, which is 10% free defense. Why would I not take that? I've got the Give It Your All ability for getting to level 15 on Engineering, which is 20% dodge of all incoming damage for 3 seconds whenever I activate specific powers, which is an Engineering ability. Then I've got the Helmsman trait, which is 10% flight turn rate and a 10-second reduction to evasive maneuvers cooldowns. Last ditch effort, since I am a tactical officer, I get this. 100% damage resistance from go down fighting, so a damage resist when the crap has hit the proverbial fan. Point blank shot, a little bit of extra energy damage, again translates to threat. Beam weapon training, again translates to threat. Fleet coordinator, again translates to threat and allows me to pick up some extra damage. Operative, again, same thing, better criticals. And yeah, that's pretty much as far as traits go. You don't have to use this exact setup, that's just some of the ones that I recommend you consider. As far as starship traits goes, this is something that is unique to Tier 6 ships as far as unlocking them goes. If you max out a C-Store variant of a Tier 6 ship, you will unlock a trait. And those traits do various things. Once you unlock the trait, you can use it for any ship, any build on that particular character. If you load up another character of yours, then you'd have to acquire the trait again, but again, not that big of a deal. Now, I have emergency weapon cycle because it lets my weapons fire faster, reduces the energy weapon cost, all that type of stuff. So, needless to say, nice little kick in the pants. Then I have All Hands on Deck, which gives me some reduced cooldown times based on certain circumstances. Same thing with peak efficiency. It's the same deal. Then I have Reciprocity, basically recharge time whenever I missed whenever the enemy's firing at me, and misses, which hopefully will be a lot as a tank, so you're going to be able to abuse the living snot out of this trait, which will give you reduced tactical and intelligence officer cooldowns. Pretty much self-explanatory as to why you're going to want some of these. Then the last thing I have is improved feedback pulse, which comes from the Crenum Science ship, which again is another anniversary ship from this past go. Now, some of these things are lockbox specific traits or event ship specific traits. I'll do a couple more videos here in the future showing some different things you can do on the cheap as far as a tank goes. But then as far as space reputation goes, a lot of this is kind of personal preference, but some of the stuff that I like to have is, of course, enhanced armor pen. Gives me a little bit of an extra bypass to their armor. Energy refrequencer is one thing that I have. Depending on how much damage I do, I get 2.5% of that back as hull healing to myself. Can trigger up to 10 times a second, so that's a pretty major thing there. Then some other stuff I've got is aux power, offensive, a little bit of extra damage, precision, then advanced targeting, again kind of extra damage. As far as active reputation abilities go, two very good ones to have are quantum singularity manipulation. This can actually be used offensively or defensively. This is plus 100 to science stats for 8 seconds. After 3 seconds, it cloaks your ship for 5 seconds. And during this time, I can fire my weapons normally. So it's a nice little thing that lets you duck back. If you're about ready to throw a hazard emitters, or to throw a science team, or even a feedback pulse, or some type of science-based ability, you can use this beforehand, get a temporary boost to that, making it a lot more effective than it would otherwise normally be. Then you have the biomolecular shield generator. Basically, you get to a certain area, you throw this up, and then for 30 seconds to yourself and allies, you gain some additional shield regeneration per second, reduces incoming damage to your shields by 22%. So, pretty big thing there. It does stack with other abilities, such as if you're using the command specialization and you drop a rally point, the effect of rally point and this will actually stack with each other, and you're going to have even more defensive potential. So that's some stuff that you've got there. I also have the deploy sensor interference, just as an added little, get away from me for a couple of seconds type of things. So that's some stuff you have there. These 5th trait slots and stuff like that, you'll need to unlock from your fleet's research lab. If you don't have access to that, then maybe somebody will be kind enough to offer you an invite so you can actually take care of that. So, like I say, that's some of the stuff that you're going to want to do as a tank. As far as that goes, again, this is just kind of a basic overview of things and where it's at, and just kind of explaining some of the different things. I'll do a couple of videos later and kind of show some of this stuff in action, dealing with some of these concepts and everything. But, and I'm sure too, I'm making this sound a lot more complicated than what it actually is. It can be kind of intimidating, kind of frustrating to get used to at first, but once you learn, I could pair this ability with this, I could pair this ability with that. When this ability goes off, I want to use this. Once you start learning some of the nuances, some of the things like that, it's going to be a lot easier, you're going to have a lot easier time, and it's not going to be as nearly big of a pain as it is already, or as I'm making it sound. But anyways, like I say, that's just some of the stuff I'm going to recommend. Start with your ship, start with your start with your skills, your traits, your bridge officer abilities, specialization, stuff like that. Make sure you have a good ship, decent equipment, stuff like that. You don't have to have the ultimate of ultimate high-end pieces of gear, but you want to make sure that it does fairly decent. You want to make sure that it's going to keep you alive at least, and keep the enemy's attention. But another thing to look for, this is one last thing before I start to wrap this up, is actually your starship masteries. Is something I'm going to recommend you look for as far as what ship you pick, because that can be a huge lifesaver in a pinch. which is, of course, you've got the absorbative hull plating, which is 25 physical and kinetic damage resist rating. So that's free resist that you're getting just by unlocking this. Then you have, let's see what's after that, you have rapid repairs. Again, free hull regeneration just for unlocking. Then you have enhanced hull plating. All energy, damage resist, and radiation damage resist, 25. There for free. Again, more defensives for free. Then lastly you have armored hull, which is plus 10% hull hit points. Again, free hull, free stats to work with. So, pretty good thing to have there. Now, your starship does not have to have this exact mastery package. This is just the one that I personally prefer to have on a ship. As far as survivability goes, this one seems to do very good. But, and even after all the Tier 6 ships have come out, at the end of the day, I still prefer my Galore because of the adaptability, the survivability that this ship has, which may be surprising to some people considering how old that it is. I've got some videos up here on the channel as well showing just how nasty this ship can be when she needs to bare her teeth. But anyways, like I say, this is just some of the things that I recommend. This is some of the stuff that I do. We didn't do a combat test in this because I ran quite a bit longer than what I wanted to with this. But as far as that goes, like I say, that's just some basic stuff. Kind of read over your abilities and everything, learn how you can pair what with what, and yeah, just kind of go from there. Definitely practice. A good map that I like to test myself on is Starbase 24. Test against your friends, you know, and don't be afraid to ask for help either. You know, yeah, you're going to have those jerks out there that are going to laugh at you and everything, but if you need help, you know, feel free to message me, feel free to drop a comment and say, hey, you know, can you check this out? I'll be glad to look over your build as far as tanking goes, give you some stuff so you say, oh, I like this is good, just practice, or I might swap that for that, stuff like that. But anyways, everybody, this is Captain Blade J52, signing off.